Hey everyone, tonight we're heading into something slow, steady, and just a little dusty. Imagine this: no engines, no GPS, no honking horns, just a covered wagon, the sound of wooden wheels creaking, and the long, drawn-out hush of wind brushing across endless plains. If you're someone who sighs when the Wi-Fi lags for 5 seconds, well, let's just say, you wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes on this trail. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, let me know in the comments where you're re-listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're already several miles from where the last house sat stubbornly against the edge of the known world. The sun has started to flatten against the horizon like a soft yolk spilling over the edge of a cracked pan. A dry breath of wind trails behind your wagon, kicking up fine dust that clings to your clothes like old memories. You feel the sway of the wooden frame with each stone beneath the wheels, like a lullaby shaped from bone and timber. And it's only the first day. The others right ahead, but you've slowed a little. Your horse stubborn or just tired. You don't mind. The space gives you time to listen to the nothingness, to how deeply silence can stretch when there's no buzz of electricity. A meadow lark cuts through it with a clear whistle, and in that brief melody, you hear something more ancient than words. Your hands are dry from gripping the reins, your palms blistering in spots where the leather strap has rubbed the skin raw. But your eyes, they stay locked on the horizon, where the trail dips gently and then disappears, swallowed by earth and time. No map can prepare you for that kind of quiet, the kind that reaches into your chest and rearranges things. Somewhere behind you, the town you left still turns in its routines: bakers folding dough, children throwing stones in dusty streets, someone arguing over fence lines and cow ownership. All of it already feels like a dream you left behind at dawn. That's the funny thing about travel at this pace. The past falls away not in miles, but in hours under the sun. As the sun sinks lower, you feel the air begin to cool, not cold yet, but thoughtful. You catch a glimpse of the person you might become out here, quieter, slower, someone who listens more than talks. You wonder if you lines meet that version of yourself at the next river or the next nightfall. The wagon groans as the trail lifts gently, the slope barely noticeable, but the weight makes itself known. You adjust the load, mostly flour, beans, tools, and a jar of peaches that somehow survive 3 jolts and 1 full overturn. You're still trying to figure out how. In the fading light, you pass a patch of wild sunflowers. They face west now, golden heads bowed in reverence to the dying light. It's almost ceremonial. You remember someone once said they follow the sun because they know it always returns. You wonder what that would feel like. Certainty. Maybe you'll find out on this trail. Tonight, you camp under a sky pricked with stars. The fire crackles low, the sound small in this massive dark. A coyote howls far off, and someone in the camp chuckles. That one's looking for a dinner guest. You smile, grateful for the joke, even if your stomach reminds you that dinner was 3 crackers and a questionable jerky. History says that roughly 400,000 people cross this trail in search of new lives, new land, or just an end to the old stories. But what most folks forget is that they did it one step at a time, most on foot, most carrying more than just supplies. You wonder how many gave up, how many fell in love, how many simply disappeared into the silence. There's a rock near your camp, etched with initials and a date from 30 years ago. You run your fingers across the carving, the groove still rough. Some say it's bad luck to touch trail marks, like you're borrowing someone else's ghost. You do it anyway. The wagon cover flaps gently in the breeze, and you nestle into the canvas cocoon. The mattress is lumpy. Your blanket smells faintly of smoke and something like mint, and the stars outside blink like they know your name. Sleep doesn't come fast, but it comes gentle. Here as something strange. Historians still argue whether the trail forked at the Laramie River or a few miles south. Maps conflict, journals disagree, and even the land seems unwilling to pick a side. It's comforting, in a way, to know even history loses its place sometimes. You fall asleep to the soft rhythm of hooves shifting nearby, the creak of rope settling, and the kind of darkness you don't find in cities. Out here, it's the kind of dark that doesn't press, it receives you, like a tide pulling you slowly out to sea. The morning comes not with the shrill beep of an alarm, but with light spilling gently through the wagon canvas and the slow murmur of waking animals. A bird calls, and then another, and suddenly the plains begin to hum like a living organism stretching into consciousness. You wake with a soft ache in your back and the taste of dry air on your tongue. The fire's out, leaving behind a gray smudge of ash, and the coffee someone started smells mostly like determination and burned beans. You pull on your boots, still damp from dew, and they make that familiar creaking sound as if groaning about the day ahead. Around you, the others begin moving, quiet talk, a tin cup clinking, the snap of a blanket folded with care. No one rushes. What would be the point? Your path today leans northward, over a stretch of flat land broken only by sagebrush and the occasional bone-white stump of a long dead tree. The ruts in the ground pressed by thousands of wagon wheels before yours guide your way. Deep and stubborn, like a scar, they carry the weight of forgotten names. You wonder if someone your age once stood right where you do, wondering the same things you are. What would they think of your socks made from bamboo fibers? Or the tiny solar lantern clipped to your belt? They'd probably call you a wizard, and you'd probably agree. The wheels creak in rhythm with the horse's hooves, and the sound settles into your chest like a drumbeat. The wind carries whispers today, soft and secretive. You pass a hawk watching from a perch on a twisted branch, its eyes sharp, body unmoving, as though judging your worth before letting you pass. The road offers no reassurance, it simply continues. By mid-morning, a snake slithers across your path, vanishing into the grass before you can react. You didn't scream, but your heart certainly gave it some thought. Someone behind you chuckles. You tell yourself it was a harmless one, just a garter, or maybe a bull snake, but your brain insists it was 6 feet long and had plans for your ankles. You pause near an outcropping of stone shaped like folded parchment. The land here is strange, ancient seabed or volcanic bones. No one's quite sure. Some rocks are layered so thinly they flake apart like the pages of a fragile book. Early travelers used to write prayers on them with charcoal, slipping them into crevices like offerings. Most of them have blown away by now, but a few remain, just faint smudges of yearning and soot. Around noon, you reach the remains of a way station, a pile of collapsed logs, a rusted kettle, and the echo of voices long gone. You sit there for a while, sharing bread with the flies, letting your fingers trace the grooves of time in the weathered wood. Someone once cooked a meal here. Someone once laughed and called it home for a night. It's all dust now, but somehow the warmth lingers. You refill your canteen at a nearby stream, cold, clear, and impossibly blue. You splash your face and let the water run down your neck, your skin tightening with the chill. It's a reminder that out here, refreshment doesn't come from vending machines or fizzy drinks, it comes from the earth, honest and unflavored. You drink deeply, and for a moment, everything inside you stills. It's strange, but the hardest part about this journey isn't the walking, or the sunburn, or the occasional flying beetle that seems personally offended by your existence. It's the thinking. Out here, there's nowhere to hide from yourself. The landscape is too wide, the sky too open, and your thoughts have nothing to bounce off but bone and memory. Somewhere in the mid-afternoon haze, your wagon crosses paths with a trail of bison tracks. Their hoofs press the earth into soft bowls, now filled with dry grass. You recall that bison once covered these plains in numbers so vast, it was said a person could walk across their backs for miles without touching the ground. Of course, that's likely an exaggeration, but not by much. The great herds are mostly gone now, carved away by bullets and railroads. Some historians still argue whether it was a deliberate extermination or simply the blind hunger of industry. The truth, like most truths, probably lies somewhere uncomfortable in the middle. You climb a small rise and glance back at the trail behind you. The sun catches the tops of wagons, painting them gold, and for a brief second, it feels like watching a fleet of ships drifting across a landlocked sea. You smile at the thought, land sailors, all of you, pioneers with callous hands and questionable cooking skills. Evening stretches the light into long shadows, and the wind picks up again, trailing your movements like a curious ghost. You tie down the canvas a little tighter tonight. There's talk of a storm, and though you haven't seen a cloud, the older travelers have that look the one people get when they can smell weather in their bones. Your supper is simple: beans, a sliver of bacon, and a biscuit that could legally qualify as a building material. You chew slowly, letting the taste linger, grateful for the warmth. Someone hums a tune you half recognize, and you hum along, your voices threading into the wind. That night, you dream of things that never happened: a city built from polished stone, wagons that float, a buffalo that speaks in riddles. Dreams out here get strange. Maybe it's the air. Maybe it's the fact that the stars are so close, they seem to breathe with you, and still, you travel, not by horsepower or velocity, but by patience, by the quiet endurance that builds with every step, every creak, every choice to keep going, even when your legs say stop. The wind changes sometime before dawn, not with a sudden gust, but with a long, steady exhale, like the land itself sighing beneath you. When you open your eyes, the canvas above you trembles gently, and the air feels different, drier, but heavy, like something distant is approaching. You pull the blanket closer, savoring the warmth for just a few more moments before the day demands your movement again. You sit up slowly, bones stiff and joints clicking like the hinges of an old chest. Your breath comes out in little puffs, visible in the morning chill. The fire isn't lit yet. Someone's gathering kindling, their silhouette framed by the faint pink edge of sunrise. The sky looks bruised mauve and ash blue, like it's been holding back something all night. Breakfast is what it usually is: leftover biscuit, half an apple, and a sip of water that tastes faintly of canvas and whatever dreams filtered through the night. You chew without hurry. Everything is slower out here, not sluggish, just unhurried. Even your hunger seems to move at a different pace, as if your stomach knows there's no point in rushing. Today's stretch leads you into land so flat and wide it plays tricks on your depth perception. A rock that seems close takes nearly an hour to reach. A hill that looks like a gentle rise turns out to be a stubborn climb that makes your calves ache and your thoughts drift. You walk with the rhythm of the wagon now, a creak, a crunch, the occasional sneeze from the ox pulling your load. You've named him Elijah. He ignores you, as is his divine right. The trail becomes more defined here, cut deeper into the earth. You pass wagon ruts so entrenched they look like scars in old leather. It's said these tracks are over 60 years old, first carved by immigrants chasing the gold rush, then widened by settlers looking for farmland, and now traced by you walking not for wealth or harvest, but for the slow unrippling of time. You pass a large iron ring partially buried in the earth, once part of a wagon wheel, now a rusted relic. There's something touching about it, the way it remains here, unbothered by years, unclaimed and unbroken by the elements. Someone once relied on that wheel with everything they had. Now, it watches silently as you walk by, its purpose long fulfilled. Mid-morning brings a distant rumble, not thunder, but the groan of wood under strain. You look ahead and spot a wagon tilted oddly, its front wheel sunk halfway into a soft patch of earth. A man is kneeling beside it, muttering something about axle grease and poor judgment. You lend a hand, of course. That's the unspoken rule out here: help when asked, share what you can, and keep the jokes gentle. You grunt and push, and eventually the wagon lurches free. The man claps your back with a dusty hand, and you both laugh, though neither of you really said anything funny. It's just a release, the kind that comes from solving a problem with your muscles instead of your mind. Later, as you follow the trail again, you notice how the landscape begins to change. Low hills rise like sleeping creatures, their slopes dotted with wild flowers and tufts of stubborn grass. The soil turns reddish here, iron-rich and sun-baked. It's beautiful in that solemn, quiet way that deserts have, like the world paused to listen for something. You stop near a lone tree, its branches twisted into a shape that resembles a reaching hand. It offers little shade, but you sit anyway, drinking from your canteen and watching a pair of lizards chase each other over the rocks. You wonder if they know how old the land is beneath their feet. Probably not. But then again, maybe they do. Maybe they just don't care. You take out your small journal, soft leather, worn at the corners, and jot down a few lines. You don't write every day, but when you do, it feels more like listening than speaking. The words aren't for remembering facts, they're for remembering feelings. The hush of the land, the rhythm of your steps, the strange peace that comes from not knowing what's next. A few miles later, you reach a ridge that offers a broad view of the plain behind you. For the first time all day, you pause to really look back. The trail winds like a ribbon laid gently over the earth, and the wagons behind you seem so small, like toys or memories, just shapes against the land. It's humbling, that view. You realize how little space you occupy in this landscape, and yet how heavy your presence must feel to the earth beneath your feet. In the distance, you spot the remains of an old trading post, stone walls still standing, roof long gone. You walk slowly through it, stepping over wild grass and sun-bleached beams. There's a faint charcoal mark on one wall, a circle with a cross inside it. Some say it meant safe to stop. Others argue it marked water nearby. Historians still debate its exact purpose, but standing there, you think it just looks like someone saying, "I was here. I mattered." There's a narrow shelf carved into the wall, maybe for tools, maybe for offerings. You leave a pebble there, smooth and pale, a thank you to the road, maybe, or a nod to whatever spirits linger here, half asleep in the wind. You camp that night near the ruins, wagons forming a loose crescent to block the breeze. There's no fire, the wind is too strong, and everyone's too tired. Instead, you huddle into your blankets and watch the stars bloom overhead, one by one. There are more than you could ever count, and they shine without apology. You remember hearing once that sailors used the stars to navigate, and that some of the early pioneers tried to do the same, though it never really worked on land. The sky out here is both a map and a mystery. You try to find familiar constellations but get lost between them, as though the stars are whispering a story only half remembered. Somewhere in the night, coyotes call long, wavering cries that make the hairs on your arms stand up. You know they won't come close. Still, the sound makes you pull your blanket tighter, listening to the way their voices rise and fall like a chant from the bones of the earth. You close your eyes and breathe in the scent of dust and sage. There's no hum of streetlights, no far-off drone of traffic, just the low rustle of wind in grass and the occasional creak of canvas. You are farther from your old life than you've ever been, and yet somehow, you feel more like yourself than you have in years. You drift off with the weight of the day still in your limbs and the sound of the trail echoing faintly in your chest. The land cradles you like a sleeping child, and the wind hums a lullaby you don't need to understand. Morning arrives not with urgency, but with the gentle insistence of light creeping through canvas seams. It touches your eyelids like soft fingertips, nudging you back into the world. The chill from last night has mostly retreated, replaced by a quiet warmth that clings to your face and neck. You hear someone outside adjusting a harness, the slow jingle of metal on leather, followed by a yawn that turns into a half sungim. You stretch slowly, like a cat awakening on a windowsill, bones aching in that deeply satisfying way that only comes from honest fatigue. You stop calling this body sore, it's just adapting, learning to speak in new tenses, verbs made of dust and distance. Your feet throb like old drums, but they carry no complaint. Today is another day to move. After a quick meal of dried meat and a stale heel of bread, both chewed more out of duty than desire, you help break camp. The others are quiet this morning, but it's a peaceful sort of silence, like monks in motion. No one needs to say much. The routine has become a kind of soft religion. Fold, tie, lift, hitch, repeat. The road doesn't care how fast you move, only that you continue. The wagons lurch forward again, wheels groaning like old men standing from prayer. You fall into step beside Elijah who, as usual, spares you not even a sideways glance. But you do think he appreciates your presence, in his way. After all, he hasn't tried to trample you. Around mid-morning, the sky changes. It flattens, stretches, and becomes an enormous pale dome without texture or story. The clouds have all wandered elsewhere, and now the sun sits on its high perch, watching you with the indifference of a bored aristocrat. You squint at the horizon and see nothing but heat shimmer and earth the color of toasted parchment. It's around this time that someone in the group begins telling stories about the ancient river routes once used here before wagons, before maps. You walk and listen, the rhythm of your feet syncing with the rise and fall of the tale. You learn that long before your kind trudged across these lands with wheels and ambition, there were people who traveled on foot, guided only by the stars, the scent of water, and the shape of the land. They moved slowly? Yes, but not aimlessly. Their knowledge of terrain and weather would put your maps to shame. You learn how certain stones were placed to signal hidden springs, and that some hills were considered holy not because they were large, but because they offered shelter. You smile to yourself, so much for your fancy compass. One of the wagons breaks a spoke around noon. Again, you all stop and form a loose semicircle around it, as if holding a vigil. Repairs are delicate like surgery on a patient who won't thank you afterward. Someone uses twine. Someone else mutters about should have known better, and a third person offers a prayer disguised as a joke. You pass a flask of water around. The sun watches, unimpressed. While you wait, you explore a bit beyond the path. Just 100 paces or so, enough to feel untethered but not foolish. You find a cluster of petroglyphs carved into a red slab of stone. Spirals, stick figures, a horned animal that could be a deer or something more ancient. You crouch beside them and run your fingers along the grooves, marveling that they're still here. Still speaking. No one really knows what they meant. Some historians say they marked migration routes. Others argue they were part of ceremonial rites. The truth is, we'll probably never know. And maybe that's fine. Not everything needs translating. Some things are meant to be felt rather than solved. The group moves again in the afternoon. Your shadow grows long and thin, stretching ahead like it's trying to scout the way for you. You catch yourself walking with your mouth slightly open, letting the warm air fill your lungs slowly, like a meditative breath. There's something deeply satisfying about moving without noise, just the soft whisper of boots on dust, the occasional snort from an ox, and the steady, sacred drone of time. You stop to rest near a cluster of desert scrub. They're resilient things, these plants small, gnarled, perpetually thirsty, yet they survive. You crouch beside one and notice its tiny flowers, blooming despite the heat. You whisper a small compliment to it. It doesn't respond, but you swear it leans a little in your direction. Later, someone finds an arrowhead half buried near the trail. It's obsidian sharp and cool, a small artifact of precision in a world of chaos. You hold it in your hand and imagine the person who shaped it, who tied it to a shaft and hoped it would bring food or protection or victory. The edge is still sharp enough to cut. You think about keeping it, but in the end, you place it on a rock nearby. Let it continue its silent watch. Evening creeps in gently, like a cat slipping through a cracked door. The sky fades from gold to rose to a soft lavender, and the air cools just enough to make you miss the sun. You set camp near a dry creek bed, its pebbled floor shaped like memory. The water hasn't been there in years, but the curve of its body remains, like a ghost still wearing its bones. Someone hums an old tune while unpacking. It sounds like lullabies stretched out for miles, worn smooth by generations. You hum along, not knowing the words but understanding the tone. That's the funny thing about music out here, it finds you when you need it, even if you don't remember the melody. Dinner is thin soup and dry beans, but it's shared. and the laughter is real. You sit by the dying light, watching the shadows stretch and blend until the world becomes soft-edged and warm. Someone points out a planet in the sky bright and steady. You nod, pretending to know which one it is. Before sleep, you walk alone a short distance from camp. The air is cool, and your breath returns to mist. You look up, and the stars are overwhelming tonight like a great sieve poured out across the sky. There's no moon, only the infinite hush of light too far away to touch, but too present to ignore. You lie down on a patch of soft earth and close your eyes. The land holds you as if you belong. And for the first time all day, you feel it not just beneath your body, but inside your chest, moving with your heartbeat, whispering its old stories through your bones. You sleep deeply, dreamlessly, and the night passes like a kind hand smoothing your brow. You wake to the scent of ash and canvas, a gentle breeze playing at the flap of the wagon's covering. The world is a palette of soft colors, muted blues, faded ochres, and pale greens. Morning is neither loud nor bright here. It arrives like a whisper. You sit up slowly, the blanket still warm around your legs, and listen to the faint clatter of cooking tins and the murmured greetings of early risers. Someone coughs, someone else laughs quietly. The air smells faintly of dry sage and damp soil, the remnants of last night's dew clinging to the earth. Your body aches again, but it's a different ache now, less like protest, more like habit, as though your muscles have joined the rhythm of the land, taking on its slow, grinding patience. You step down from the wagon, boots crunching into loose dirt, and you stretch until your arms tremble. The sunrise spills out sideways over the low hills, not dramatic but deliberate, as if even the sun respects the unhurried tempo of your journey. There's talk this morning about river crossings ahead. The trail bends toward a winding body of water that used to be far more generous. Some say it's still passable this time of year. Others remember a family that lost half their wagon to an unexpected sinkhole last spring. You listen while chewing a biscuit so dry it could double as a roof tile. No one knows exactly what the river will be like today, but there's a kind of quiet confidence in the way people speak about it. You'll get across, somehow, eventually. As the caravan rolls forward, the terrain shifts again. Where yesterday was a stretch of stubborn dust and stunted brush, today brings low grassy slopes and cottonwoods that whisper overhead. Their leaves shimmer like coins in the light, the soft rustling sounding almost like conversation. You walk beneath their shade, grateful for the cover and the slight coolness that settles across your neck and shoulders. Around midday, you come upon an abandoned way station, little more than a crumbling chimney and the suggestion of walls now taken back by weeds. There's no sign to say who lived here, no date chiseled into stone, just a rusted horseshoe nailed to what remains of a door frame. You step carefully over the threshold, imagining what it must have been like when the place still breathed with life. A small stove, a pot of beans on the fire, maybe a child playing with a carved wooden horse in the dust outside. One of the travelers finds a fragment of a porcelain plate buried near a collapsed shelf. Blue floral pattern, the kind you've seen in older relatives' homes. There's a moment of reverence, as if you've stumbled across something sacred. Not because of what it is, but because of what it meant. A meal, a home, a life trying to be ordinary in a place that rarely allowed it. You learn that in the 1840s, places like this were built every few dozen miles as resting spots for weary travelers. They weren't official stations, not government outposts. They were private homes, usually run by families brave or desperate enough to try making a life on the edge of everything. Most didn't last more than a few years. Disease, raids, isolation. One historian noted that more than half of these stations disappeared without even leaving a name behind. Just stone, wood, and memory. You leave a small rock on the doorstep before moving on. A gesture, a marker, so the place isn't alone in being forgotten. The river appears by late afternoon. It's not wide, but it winds with purpose, cutting through the land like a crease in old cloth. You can hear its voice before you see it, the low, constant murmuring of water over stones. When you reach it, You realize it's shallower than feared, but faster too. The sun reflects sharply off the surface, turning it into liquid fire. Oxen are watered first, then the wagons are prepared. You're assigned to help guide Elijah's wagon across. He seems more irritable than usual, which you didn't think was possible. But, as the wheels dip into the current, something changes in him. He leans forward, murmuring to the oxen, his hands steady and sure on the reins. His face softens, just slightly. Maybe it's the water. Maybe it's the memory of another crossing, somewhere back down the line, one he doesn't speak of but clearly feels. Halfway across, the current pushes hard, and the front wheel slides unexpectedly. You stumble to the side, nearly falling into the muddy flow, but manage to catch yourself. Elijah doesn't yell, he doesn't even flinch. He just guides the beasts with a quiet firmness, nudging them back into alignment. Within minutes, the wagon reaches the opposite bank, dripping but safe. You sit down in the grass and exhale like you've been holding your breath for hours. As you wait for the others to cross, you watch the river. There's a strange peace in its movement, a kind of ancient certainty that reminds you how brief your footsteps are in the great map of time. The river has seen thousands like you pass by. Some made it. Some didn't, but all left something behind. That night, you camp by the water's edge. The group is in higher spirits, buoyed by the success of the crossing. Someone roasts a rabbit caught earlier, and the smell, enough to make your mouth water in anticipation. You sit beside the fire, legs stretched out, as a fellow traveler begins telling a tale you hadn't heard before. It's about an explorer from centuries ago who allegedly followed a similar path, convinced there was a secret route, hidden beneath the known trails, an invisible corridor protected by wind and cloud. The explorer claimed he could see signs in the way birds flew, in how the shadows fell on rocks. People thought he was mad. Maybe he was. No one ever found the wine road he spoke of. Some believe he disappeared into a canyon and became a ghost, still guiding those who walk with quiet feet. You smile. A little superstition tastes good with rabbit meat and firelight. Later, wrapped in your blanket, you lie awake staring at the ceiling of stars above. The river sings gently in the background, a lullaby older than language. You think about the man who chased the wine road and wonder if you'd follow him, given the chance. Maybe you already are, just at your own pace. The wind picks up lightly, rustling the tall grasses nearby. In the half-sleep between awareness and dream, you hear it, a sound like footsteps in the distance. Not threatening, not urgent, just there, walking with you. Walking ahead, walking behind. You smile and let the weight of the day press you into the earth. Sleep takes you without resistance. The wind carries the scent of the river long after you've left it behind, lingering on your coat and in the folds of the canvas. Morning rises slow, stretched out over the plains like a worn-out blanket. You blink at the sky, now a deeper blue, and realize you've grown to measure time less by clocks and more by the way light hits the land. Another day, another push westward, the wheels turn again. Today, the trail narrows. The wagons form a line no wider than a deer path, threading through low gullies carved by time and storm. You walk beside them, boots scuffing against soft chalky soil, and your breath settles into the measured cadence of footsteps. There's a rhythm here of oxen hooves, wheel creaks, the occasional whistle or call from up ahead. You're not just traveling anymore. You're becoming part of the trail's memory, another page written in dust and sweat. There's a new sound today, to something high and flute-like on the wind. It takes you some time to realize it's coming from the rocks themselves, hollowed and wind-worn, singing in tones that rise and fall like a forgotten melody. It makes you think of wind chimes back home, hung from the porch during spring storms. But this is wilder, more ancient, as though the land is remembering its own stories. A fellow traveler walking beside you says, "Some say the rocks remember the names of those who died here." He grins as if joking, but you don't laugh, because it feels true in that moment. You touch a boulder's surface as you pass, and it's warm, alive, almost breathing. By midday, The caravan stops near an outcrop shaped like a broken tooth, jutting out of the ground with strange elegance. The scouts have gone ahead, checking for signs of trail ruts and watering holes. You take the moment to rest, your back against a wheel, your gaze drifting across the open land. There are fewer trees now, just low shrubs and patches of wiry grass that whisper under the breeze. A woman named Delia sits beside you, brushing the dust off a folded map. Her hands are steady, though her eyes flick off and toward the horizon. She speaks softly, as if not wanting to wake the stones. You know about the Fremont petroglyphs? She asks without turning her head. You shake your head, watching the wagons in the distance sway like ships at anchor. They're out there, she says, pointing with her chin toward a cliff several miles away. Carved into the walls figures with big eyes, twisted limbs. Some say they're spirit guides, others say aliens. You raise an eyebrow. Aliens. She chuckles. Well, you know how folks are. We see something we don't understand. We fill in the blanks with whatever haunts us. You don't doubt that. After weeks on this trail, your own mind has learned to see shapes in shadows and hear footsteps in silence. Not out of fear, but something quieter, a need to make sense of the vastness. Later in the afternoon, you pass a fallen wagon. Its axle snapped clean through, the remnants already half buried in dust. There's no sign of the family that owned it, no bones, no belongings. Just a red scarf caught on a nearby bush, flapping in the wind like a forgotten flag. One of the older men mutters a prayer under his breath as you move past. You overhear someone say it might have been abandoned during the Great Cholera year 1850, when thousands died on the trail, their graves unmarked or disguised so scavengers wouldn't find them. Some graves were made inside old wagon ruts, so that the next train would roll over them and erase the mound. A quiet burial, lost to wheels and weather. The irony in Lost on You, death following a road meant for life. You cross a wide flat valley just before dusk. The light plays tricks again, turning every rise into a possible fort, every rock into a crouching figure. The valley floor is littered with broken buffalo bones bleached white, some shattered, others still whole, a ghost herd, scattered and silent. That night, a fire crackles beside a circle of tired bodies. Someone roasts coffee beans in a tin pan, the smell sharp and comforting. There's talk of the great buffalo hunts, of how herds once stretched for miles, blocking wagon trains for hours. One man recalls a story passed down from his uncle, how a hunter once stood atop his wagon and shot until the rifle turned too hot to hold. He killed over 24 beasts in a single morning, none of which he could haul away. A strange sort of waste. Some historians say that's what really doomed the tribes. Someone mutters, not the treaties or the soldiers, just greed and lead. Another voice replies, historians still argue over how much was lost by accident, and how much was strategy. No one answers that. Later, as you sit near the fire, a young girl named Clara offers you a charred piece of dried apple from her family's stores. She doesn't speak much, but she's curious. Her fingers are stained with berry juice from some bush she found earlier in the day. Do you think we'll see Indians? She asks plainly, with the innocence only children can afford. You pause before answering. Maybe, if they want to be seen. She nods, as though that makes perfect sense. The fire dies down, and the stars emerge again, wide and scattered like thrown seeds. You wrap your blanket tighter around your shoulders and settle into the earth's cradle, watching embers glow like the last thoughts of a long day. You remember something from a book you once read, a note scribbled in the margin by an unknown hand. What is it we seek out here? A place, or a version of ourselves that no longer fits back there. You don't have an answer, but the question follows you into sleep. In the hours before dawn, you wake briefly to the sound of distant thunder. Except ... there are no clouds, no storm. Just a low, rhythmic sound, like drums echoing through stone. It fades quickly, and you're not sure if it was real or dream. But you fall asleep again with your hand resting against the earth, just in case it was the land speaking. You wake before the sun crests the far rim of the earth, In that pale hour, when shadows still stretch wide across the land and the chill hasn't yet surrendered to day, the night has left a crispness in your bones, the kind that settles into joints and stays there, not painfully, but as a reminder you are not sleeping in a bed. You are sleeping in the belly of a moving world, and it is never entirely warm. Your breath curls in the air, barely visible. Around you, the camp lies quiet, a mess of slumped tents and bundled figures. The ashes in the fire pits still glow faintly, little embers of yesterday's comfort. Somewhere in the near distance, oxen shuffle. You rise slowly, with the deliberate movement of someone who has done this every morning for weeks, and likely will for many more. The dew has kissed everything in silver. The land today is different. You feel it even before you see it. Gone are the gentle plains and the soft undulations of open space. The ground rises in steady rolls, thick with brush and sharp stone. Trees cluster more tightly, though their limbs remain twisted and sparse. The trail has narrowed to something barely passable. You understand now why the old maps labeled these regions with warnings, drawn not with precision, but caution. Rough country, some scrawled. Others simply wrote, proceed only if necessary, and yet you proceed. The wagons groan as they tilt over uneven ground. The wheels strain against embedded rock, and the air grows thick with a mingled smell of trampled sage and cracked grease. You find yourself placing each step more carefully now. No longer mindless walking, but active negotiation with the trail. Slopes lean just enough to pull wagons sideways, forcing drivers to counterbalance with precision learned by repetition, not instruction. One mistake and a wagon might tip, spilling months of labor into ravines from which they cannot be recovered. This stretch of land, they say, saw the great mountain men pass through figures of legend wrapped in real dust and blood. Individuals who came not for homesteads but for solitude, for furs and silence, and perhaps something unnameable even to themselves. They vanished into canyons, lived by streams that rarely appeared on any map, and died often without witnesses or markers. Some historians still debate whether these men were pioneers of a kind, or merely wanderers resisting the pull of community. Perhaps both. As you walk, you see signs of those who came before, trees with bark missing in narrow bands, rubbed raw by pack animals tethered too long, carvings on rocks, initials, dates, the occasional symbol whose meaning is now forgotten. You pass a cairn, a humble pile of stones barely a foot high. It doesn't look like much, but it halts your steps. There is something reverent about it, quiet and unassuming. You wonder who placed those stones, and why. A grave, a warning, a farewell. The wind answers nothing. Mid-morning brings a long incline, steep enough to require ropes and brakes. You lend your weight to one of the wheels, pressing your shoulder against the wooden rim while your boots slide in loose gravel. Every muscle contracts, and the wagon creaks in complaint. Behind you, others do the same. There is no glamour here, just effort. In the silent pact of mutual endurance, you remember reading once that in these hills, long before wagons ever came, ancient peoples buried their dead in cliff faces, high above the reach of predators or floods. Some remains were found tucked in narrow ledges, wrapped in woven mats, their belongings placed carefully beside them. Beads, tools, fragments of pottery. The thought fills you with a strange respect not for the dead, necessarily, but for the intention. To honor even in isolation, to believe that even after the journey ends, there is still somewhere to go. As the ascent levels out, the trail widens briefly and offers a view. You pause to catch your breath and look back. The camp has vanished into the folds of the hills, and the land stretches out behind you like a map with the lines faded by age. It's a humbling sight, all that way, and yet still so far to go. A distant ridge frames the horizon, and the path points toward it like a drawn line. That ridge, you recall, was once a boundary marker, not for modern states, but for hunting grounds, migrating routes, and ancient divisions among tribes. The people who lived here didn't draw lines on paper, they followed stars, rivers, wind. To them, The land wasn't divided, it was known, named not in borders, but in stories. As you move forward again, the sun arcs higher, but never harshly. The light here feels filtered, softened by elevation and the haze of earth dust. You pass a cluster of burned stumps, blackened and sun-bleached. Evidence of a fire, though you can't tell how recent, maybe lightning, maybe deliberate. In the old days, controlled burns were used to manage grassland health, to encourage regrowth, a practice misunderstood by settlers, and often suppressed. Some historians argue that much of the prairie was shaped not by nature alone, but by centuries of careful human stewardship work erased not by time, but by policy. You step around a patch of scorched earth and notice how green shoots already push through the ash. Life, quietly persistent. You wonder how many things in the world work this way, burned down, only to rise again in forms not immediately recognizable. The afternoon brings with it a fatigue more mental than physical. You feel the press of monotony, not boredom, but the kind of weight that comes from doing the same thing over and over while the land around you stays largely unchanged. Even the beauty feels repetitive after a while, like staring at the same painting for hours. You find yourself thinking of things you haven't thought of in years, old smells, forgotten rooms, moments that had no meaning then, but now seem to matter for reasons you can't explain. Your mind drifts, but your feet do not. The body knows what to do. You reach a narrow pass by early evening. The rocks rise steeply on both sides, casting long shadows that make the path feel like a corridor. The air cools quickly. Somewhere in the stone above, a hawk cries once, sharp and brief. You look up, but see nothing, just a streak of sky turning amber. This place is called the Whispering Gate, though no one remembers why. Some say the wind funnels here and carries voices. Others say it's where a wagon party once vanished without a trace, their last campsite found here, their tracks ending in silence. The story unconfirmed, of course, but the name remains. You pass through slowly and feel the air change around you. It's not colder, just quieter. Even the wheels seem to hush. You do not speak, nor do those nearby. There's a shared understanding in silence. As night falls, the camp sets up in a shallow basin beyond the gate. The stars come later here, as if hesitating, but when they arrive, they are clear and sharp, no longer dulled by dust. You lie in your bedroll and stare up, seeing not constellations, but the suggestion of pathways between stars, like veins or rivers, connecting one edge of the sky to the other. You think about the day, how it demanded much, and gave little in return, at least not intangible rewards. But still, it feels like something was earned. A kind of permission, perhaps, to keep going. The night settles like a heavy blanket, and sleep reaches for you slowly, as if unsure whether to come fully or only in parts. You give yourself to it gradually, heartbeat by heartbeat, until the waking world recedes. Above you, the land breathes, not in gasps, but in deep, ancient sighs. You are not the first to sleep here, and you will not be the last. Morning arrives not with noise, but with a soft light seeping across the basin floor, nudging you gently back into awareness. There is a stillness here that feels earned, like the hush following the final note of a long-forgotten hymn. The rocks remain unmoved, the air thin but not biting, and the stars have vanished without drama, leaving only a cool blue sky. Around you, others stir without speaking, still folded into themselves, shaped by the shared fatigue of yesterday's climb. Today's journey begins not with urgency but with reverence. You pack slowly, hands moving over familiar tasks, rolling the blanket, tying the satchels, testing the strength of leather straps. The camp breaks down like a well-practiced ritual, each person knowing where to be, when to lift, when to pause. No orders are given. This is how necessity trains the body to act as memory, not as will. The trail leads upward again, tracing the spine of a ridge that stretches like the back of a slumbering beast. From its crest, you see the valley that lies beyond, a vast expanse of slate-gray rock, streaked with dry creeks and interrupted only by scattered shrubs. At its far edge, a range of low hills leans into the sky, their silhouettes blurred by distance and heat. The enormity of the view doesn't inspire awe as much as resignation. There is no going around, only through. As you descend into the valley, the earth changes texture. Where once the ground had offered some yield to your steps, here it is unrelenting. Hard-packed clay baked to near stone, cracking in places like old paint. The sound of boots scuffing the surface is sharp and dry. Wagon wheels scrape noisily, their iron rims groaning in protest. Dust rises in lazy spirals with each movement, clinging to your clothes, your skin, your lungs. There is no shade. Even the sparse vegetation seems reluctant to exist here, brittle stalks and low, thorny growths with leaves the color of faded parchment. Everything is defensive, adapted not for beauty, but survival. You pass the carcass of something once four-legged, now reduced to bones and fragments of hide. Not recent, not ancient. Just an artifact of this place's indifference. Time dilates in the heat. Minutes stretch thin, and hours become indistinguishable. There is no breeze to mark change, no clouds to measure the sky. The sun simply climbs and stares, your body continues, propelled more by rhythm than by choice. In this wide silence, even thought becomes cumbersome. Instead, your awareness narrows to the essentials: step placement, water rationing, maintaining distance from the wagon's edge. Midway through the valley, you reach what was once a riverbed. It is dry now, braided with pale roots and lined with pebbles polished smooth by ancient water. You step into it and follow its course for a while, letting its gentle curvature break the monotony. This is a ghost of a river, a memory carved into stone. Yet in its absence, it still shapes the land. You think of how many things in life follow this same pattern, presence not required to leave a mark. Crossing the riverbed, you find remnants of a campsite from another group. Rusted tin, a broken axle, scraps of canvas pinned beneath rocks. Nothing taken, nothing returned for. Abandonment always carries a certain sadness, but here it feels more like surrender and acceptance that not everything can be carried forward. You imagine the moment of decision, the internal weighing of cost versus hope, and the silent grief of letting go. The afternoon wears on without punctuation. Each mile gained is indistinguishable from the last. But in that repetition, something settles in your mind, a kind of quiet, not the absence of sound, but the absence of judgment. You stop asking how much farther. You stop calculating the weight of your steps. There is only movement and the land beneath it. Eventually, the ridge line on the far horizon begins to rise from mirage into form. The hills there are not dramatic, but they promise a shift, a change in elevation, in pattern, in rhythm. And in that promise lies your only momentum. With renewed focus, you press on, climbing the rise. Your legs burn, the incline is deceptive, gradual but persistent. The path narrows again, pinched between outcroppings of volcanic stone. Here, the terrain becomes fractured, split into jagged shelves and loose gravel that shifts with each step. Progress demands attention. There is no place for drift. At the summit, the land opens unexpectedly. Before you lies a high plateau, broad and wind-carved. The earth here is redder, softer in places, interrupted by narrow ravines and wide, sweeping curves of sedimentary rock. You are reminded, briefly, of the ocean, not in appearance, but in scale and movement. This place feels less like a destination than a space the world forgot to close. Wind returns at this altitude, brushing against your skin like a hand searching for something lost. You breathe more deeply now, not because the air is richer, but because your body recognizes a reprieve, even if temporary. The group camps near the edge of the plateau that evening, close to a shallow depression where rain might gather if the sky ever weeps again. You gather stones for a windbreak and set your bedroll where the ground dips gently. There is no fire tonight, wood is scarce, and what little can be burned is saved for cooking. Darkness arrives not with fear, but with quiet satisfaction. The stars bloom slowly, one by one, until the sky feels crowded with witness. You lie awake for some time, listening to the wind whistle low through rock crevices, thinking about the space between where you began and where you now lie. The land has changed you not dramatically, but insistently. It has stripped away the surplus of thought, the preoccupation with beginnings and ends. What remains is not clarity, but stillness. And in that stillness, a subtle understanding. Not all journeys are measured by milestones. Some are measured by what you leave behind, some by what you no longer need. You recall a journal you once read, from a traveler long dead, who wrote not about destinations, but about the weight of silence. He had crossed similar lands, though in a different age. His words had described the same sky, this same hush, this same sense of time bending inward. At the time, his reflections had seemed indulgent, now they seem necessary. True knowledge, you think, does not always arrive in words, but in the lived repetition of moments that resist summary? Before sleep takes you, you notice something carved into the stone nearby. Just a few faint lines of pattern, not a message, perhaps the work of someone passing, someone who needed to leave a shape behind, even if no one would ever understand it. A gesture, not a statement, you consider carving your own mark beside it. Not out of pride, but to participate in the long, quiet story of those who moved through this place before you. But you do not. You let the stone be, the wind continues, the stars remain, and your breath joins the countless others who once slept beneath this same unending sky. The morning sun spills across the plateau slowly, like ink across parchment, bleeding into every crevice and pulling the world awake with quiet certainty. You rise before it touches your face, sensing its nearness before you ever feel its warmth. The air is cold at this height, thin and sharp, and your breath forms small ghosts that hover before dissolving into the wind. Around you, the others stir in much the same way they did yesterday, with the familiarity of routine more than urgency. There is something sacred in this slowness, something that feels like ceremony. As you stretch your limbs and test your footing on the uneven ground, you become aware of how much your body has changed. The ache in your joints has become less complaint and more companion. Your feet have learned to adjust before pain arrives, and your eyes now measure distances not in miles, but in shadows and slopes. It is not mastery you've gained, but intimacy with yourself, with the land, with the motion of days unfolding underfoot. The trail leads westward across the plateau, skimming the edge of a shallow canyon that runs like a vein through the rock. The color of the earth shifts as you walk, from terracotta to ochre to pale sand, depending on the minerals beneath and the stories they've held for millennia. You catch yourself staring into the canyon's depth, not searching for anything, just letting your gaze fall where gravity asks it to. The wind slips up from below in bursts, carrying the scent of dried moss and distant dust. It rustles your clothing and whistles softly through the cracks in your gear, like a forgotten tune that the land is still trying to remember. By midday, the plateau begins to slant downward, not steeply, but persistently. The decline feels like a gift, and you allow yourself to savor the ease it brings. With each step, the horizon shifts, revealing more of what lies ahead: a narrow valley, verdant by comparison with winding streams, and patches of green that seem almost too bright after so many days of stone and drought. The valley floor is far off, but its presence is a promise, and promises, however distant, carry weight. As the descent continues, you come upon remnants of another passage, stone cairns stacked deliberately at intervals, some no taller than your knee, others rising like sentinels nearly to your shoulder. They are not natural. Someone placed them here, though it's impossible to say when or why. Perhaps to mark the safest route, or to honor the dead, or simply to say, "We were here." You pause by one, running your fingers across the smoothness of its topmost rock, and feel the trace of countless hands before yours. It's comforting, in a way, to know that even without maps or records, the human impulse to mark a path endures. The land becomes less forgiving as you approach the canyon's edge. The trail narrows, squeezed between crumbling shale on one side and a sure drop on the other. You must walk single file here, cautious and silent. The wagon train slows, and the creak of wood and metal becomes a steady hymn of motion and friction. Every now and then, a rock slips beneath someone's boot and tumbles into the canyon, its fall echoing faintly until the sound is swallowed. There is no drama to it, just a quiet surrender to gravity. It is during this stretch that you spot something unexpected, a petroglyph carved into the rock face just above eye level. Faint but visible, the image shows a series of concentric circles with arrows radiating outward, perhaps a symbol of migration, or perhaps something ceremonial. No one speaks of it. They don't need to. The meaning ain't what matters. The fact that it remains does. It has weathered time, erosion, and indifference, and yet here it is, still offering itself to the gaze of a passing stranger. As the sun begins its descent toward the western ridge, the trail finally opens into the valley. The transition is not abrupt. The rock gives way gradually to soil, the brush grows taller, and birds, actual birds, flutter between branches overhead. Their songs are thin but joyous, a reminder that life has persisted in corners where you might not have thought to look. You stop near one of the trickling streams to refill your canteen, the water cold and clear and tasting faintly of minerals. It may be the cleanest thing you've consumed in days, and you let it rest on your tongue for a moment longer than necessary, like a blessing. Camp is made beside the water, not out of convenience, but necessity. The animals drink first, their thirst evident in the way they press forward. Then the people, then the pots and canteens. The fire is modest tonight, just enough for warmth and a small meal. You sit a little farther from the group than usual, drawn not by solitude but by stillness. You watch the sky change, the deepening blue giving way to violet and then to that inky black that always seems too large to be real. A few stars appear, and then more, and suddenly the whole sky is awake. You lie back and trace imaginary lines between them, as you did when you were younger, before you ever imagined a life that would bring you to places like this. Your thoughts drift toward those who never made it to this valley, whose bones rest somewhere back along the trail, unmarked and unnamed. You think of how easily your path might have joined theirs. The difference feels less like luck and more like circumstance, weather, chance, the strength of a wheel, and yet, here you are. You recall something one of the older travelers once said, months ago, while waiting out a storm under the shelter of a boulder. That history in just what survives, but what is carried. Not just names and dates, but gestures, habits, the way one moves across land, the way one speaks to silence. You wonder what you are carrying now, what stories live in your gait, in the pattern of your breath, in the way your hands have come to rest on your knees when you're tired. You wonder what you will carry from this place, and whether it will be something you can name. Later, long after the fire has died and the camp has quieted, you hear something in the distance. Not danger, just sound, a rustling, perhaps wind through taller grasses, or the movement of a large animal several ridges away. You do not rise, you do not reach for anything. You simply listen. The land has not spoken to you in words, but it has spoken. In its shape, in its echoes, in its patience. And now, as you close your eyes beneath the star-flung dome of night, you begin to feel, not think, not assume, but feel that you are beginning to understand. The journey is not a test, nor is it a punishment. It is a teacher, a slow, unhurried one. It asks only that you pay attention, that you let go of haste and hunger for arrival, that you learn how to walk with time, not against it. It will not tell you what you seek, but it will show you what remains when everything else has fallen away. You awaken before dawn, not because of noise or discomfort, but because of the strange contentment of having slept under stars unfiltered by roof or city. There is something to be said for how quiet the earth becomes in the early hours, before the birds rise, before the light thickens the outlines of trees. It is not silence, exactly, but stillness, a kind of hush that doesn't ask for attention, but rewards it if given. The coals from last night's fire are barely glowing, a faint red heartbeat nestled under ash. You stir them with a stick, but there's no need to rekindle them yet. Instead, you sit. You wrap your coat tighter against the crisp air and let your breath meet the morning mist. It's strange how accustomed you've grown to being cold, not comfortable, but acquainted. There's a kind of honesty in discomfort, something the modern world has tried to pave over with thermostats and sealed windows. Out here, discomfort is just part of the language. When the light finally breaks over the ridge, it reveals a valley heavy with dew. The grasses shimmer like metal, bending slightly beneath the weight of moisture. Your boots leave darker prints as you walk, each step pressing into the world and vanishing within moments, as if the land is practicing forgiveness. Today's trail veers southward, toward the edge of an old floodplain, where the soil is rich and dark, but unpredictable. The wagons take longer to load this morning, wheels needing extra attention after yesterday's rough descent. You use the time to tighten your packs and examine the soles of your feet, which have become both tougher and more tender with the passing days. Blisters have calloused, calluses have split, but you move through it now with the patience of someone who knows pain isn't the enemy, it's the guide. As the caravan begins to move again, you find your stride between two deep wheel tracks that have been carved slowly into the earth. They are not new, perhaps left by an earlier train, or perhaps older still. You can almost imagine them as ghost lanes, repeating themselves across generations, the same story told with slightly different punctuation. The sun rises higher, and with it the wind picks up, stirring dry leaves and tugging at the loose fabric around your shoulders. In the distance, the floodplain opens wide, revealing the skeletons of what might once have been homesteads or trading posts, just outlines now, worn flat by time and swallowed by grasses. You pause near one, placing a hand on a barely visible foundation stone. It is still warm from the sun. This was once a shelter. You think, this was once someone's proof of permanence, and yet, permanence here is illusion. The land doesn't yield easily to ideas of ownership or legacy. It reclaims, slowly, kindly even, but with certainty. As you continue, you find a peculiar marker along the trail, a single iron horseshoe, upright in the ground as though placed deliberately. It is rusted and pocked, yet still holds its shape. You kneel beside it, running a finger along its curve, wondering who lost it and when. Maybe it was never lost, maybe it was left. Some say placing a horseshoe upright is for luck, though others argue it must be hung over a doorway. Out here, neither rule applies. Out here, things mean what you choose them to mean. A historian once argued that symbols only endure if they remain useful, but others disagree. Some symbols endure precisely because they outlast their usefulness, becoming myths instead of instructions. You smile at the thought, realizing you've begun to speak history's language more fluently, not through books or lessons, but by walking inside its footprints. By mid-afternoon, the floodplain gives way to rising hills again, more rounded than jagged, covered in tall, golden grasses that sway in unison like a choir. Walking through them, your legs disappear for moments at a time, brushing against the smooth stalks that whisper secrets you never quite translate. Grasshoppers leap away from your steps, and birds fly up in short bursts, always just ahead, as if guiding rather than fleeing. You come to a ridge with a view so wide, it almost hurts to look at. The horizon curves slightly here, a gentle reminder that the world is not flat, and that what you see is always just part of something larger. Far in the distance, you catch a glimmer, perhaps water, perhaps metal, it doesn't matter which. The mind hungers for signs, for markers of where and when, even when the body has learned not to ask. Your shadow stretches behind you now, long and lean, following rather than leading. You find that comforting. Evening comes softly, painted in violets and honey. The camp is made near an old oak tree, unusually large for this region, its roots exposed like knuckles. Some say trees like this were used as boundary markers by early settlers, or even earlier tribes. Others believe they were spared from clearing because they were deemed sacred, or unlucky to cut down. The stories don't agree, but still the tree stands, its bark furrowed, its limbs wide and watchful. You sit beneath it with your back against its trunk, and you think about how many other backs must have rested in this same spot. Soldiers, hunters, lovers, wanderers. You think of the tree not just as a witness, but as a keeper of breath. So much exhalation has passed here. So much has been said aloud and left behind, absorbed into the fibers of this old sentinel. As darkness deepens, a quiet settles that is different from the morning stillness. This is not waiting, it is resting. The night is not an absence of day, but a full presence of its own. The stars reappear, and you find yourself mapping the same constellations as last night, though now they feel closer, as if the sky has dropped a little lower in your favor. Lying on your bedroll, you hear the subtle life of night moving around you, insects ticking like tiny clocks, the distant snap of a twig under something heavier, the occasional hoot of an owl. None of it alarms you. These are not sounds of danger, but of continuity. You are part of this night, not separate from it. You let your hand rest on the ground, feeling the earth's cool pulse beneath your fingers. There's a rhythm here, ancient and unhurried. It doesn't speak, not in the way you're used to, but it does not need to. It simply offers its presence, and tonight, that's enough. History is thick in this valley, though the books may not say so. They prefer battles and treaties, maps and names, but history lives here too, in the quiet persistence of the land, in the fragments of intention left by those who pass through, in the stones stacked without ceremony, and the trails worn not by wheels alone, but by longing. The slow pace of your journey has allowed you to notice things you would have otherwise passed by, the shift in soil color beneath your boots, the way certain birds only sing in the early part of morning, the way wind sometimes changes direction without reason. These small things accumulate, becoming the fabric of your experience. They stitch the days together, not with grand events, but with the consistency of quiet observation. You begin to realize that it is not the destination that holds meaning, but the act of going and going slowly. Not because slow is better, but because slow is full. Full of time, full of noticing, full of breath. And perhaps that is the point, not to reach a place, but to let the place unfold around you as you move through it, to become so attuned to the journey that the arrival feels like a footnote rather than a climax. As your eyes close, you let your body soften into the ground's embrace, trusting it to hold you. You don't worry about tomorrow's trail. It will come, as it always does, with its own weight and beauty. For now, you simply lie still, the last warmth of the day resting on your cheeks like a blessing. The journey had lengthened not only in distance, but in depth. Each step now felt less like a forward motion and more like a weaving thread by thread. The landscape stitched itself into your consciousness. There was no longer a distinction between you and the land. You no longer moved through it as a visitor. You had become part of its long, unbroken rhythm, a silent strand folded into its tapestry of seasons, decay, and rebirth. The morning began without a signal. There was no bird call that announced it, no flush of sunrise fanfare. Instead, it crept forward slowly, like a tide reaching through the reeds of slumber. When your eyes opened, the light had already found the tips of the distant trees. They shimmered gold and white in a chill that hadn't yet receded. You rose slowly, not out of lethargy, but out of reverence, knowing the day deserved a kind of ceremonial attention. There was no rush. The caravan had learned, through effort and misstep, that urgency did not yield reward here. The trail demanded presence, not speed. The land taught restraint. A misjudged crossing, a hurried wheel, a hasty hand could turn 1 hour's ambition into 3 days of reparation. So everything now moved with the patience of those who understood time not as an enemy to conquer, but as a river in which they floated. The route ahead meandered through a stretch of ancient woodland, untouched by fire for decades, its canopy high and vaulting like the arches of forgotten cathedrals. The trees rolled enough to carry stories in their bark, not in words, but in knots and leanings and lichen. Some had grown at peculiar angles, compensating for rock or wind, while others stood with such perfect verticality they seemed almost arrogant. Every root that wound across the path became a reminder to look down, to pay attention, to respect what was not paved over. You passed no signs of recent habitation, only the rustle of wildlife and the evidence of its passing scattered feathers, hoof prints near a stream, gnawed bark. These were the living messages of the forest, left without expectation of interpretation. You understood, none the less. The woods didn't ask to be deciphered. They asked to be entered quietly. For hours, you walked in silence. No conversation, no commentary. The only sound was the steady breathing of bodies in motion and the rhythm of boots pressing into softened earth. At one point, the trail dipped into a hollow where the air turned moist and pungent with rot, not unpleasantly so, but in a way that reminded you of growth beneath the surface. Here, mushrooms bloomed along the base of trees like small, mute attendants. Their caps glistened in shadowed light, each one a tiny monument to decay's quiet beauty. You paused often, not to rest, but to take in the shifting textures of the trail, the way the soil darkened with shadow, how patches of moss grew denser near stones, how the air cooled as you descended even slightly. These were not distractions, but part of the trail itself. The path was not just something to walk through, but something to witness. Eventually, the forest gave way to a swath of meadow land, its grass high and coarse, dotted with wild sage and bluebells. The trail thinned here, broken up by the grazing of animals long gone. Hoof prints turned to shallow depressions, and the compass of your step relied more on instinct than markers. The open land felt both freeing and uncertain. Without the trees to frame your progress, the distance seemed to stretch endlessly. The sun overhead offered no shade and little mercy. Still, there was something exhilarating about this openness. The eye could travel without obstruction, the mind followed. Thoughts unfurled slowly and without insistence, reflections, not of destination, but of belonging. You considered how strange it was that a body could become accustomed to this way of living. How, given enough days, even hardship could become a comfort. The ache in your legs was now a familiar companion. The sunburn on your neck no longer stung, but merely pulsed gently, like a heartbeat in the skin. You wondered what it meant to be shaped by a place. Not just to learn its trails or its climate, but to be reshaped in some quiet, foundational way. As if your personality, your manner of thought, could be softened and carved by wind and terrain, just as surely as a stone is shaped by river water. There were moments lately where you caught yourself thinking not in words, but in sensations: sun on back, hunger in the gut, the pull of gravity in each step. Around midday, you crested a low ridge and caught sight of the valley below, broad and golden, lined on its far edge by a thin ribbon of trees marking the presence of a river. It shimmered in the distance, more mirage than certainty. Rivers were like that from afar, promises that invited but gave no guarantees. You descended slowly. The ridge was steeper than it looked, the grass dry and loose beneath your feet. More than once you had to catch yourself, leaning back and letting gravity dictate the pace. There was a particular humility in surrendering control to the terrain. It reminded you that walking wasn't always about pressing forward, it was also about yielding. As you reached the bottom, the air thickened with warmth and scent. The grasses here grew taller and sweeter. The hum of bees rose around you, not menacing, but constant. Insects droned between blooms of yellow and white. The drone was hypnotic, and for a moment you let yourself be lulled, standing motionless, just breathing. The body had become so accustomed to motion that stillness now felt like a deliberate act. The river, when you reached it, was narrow but fast, its banks rimmed with gravel and sun-dried driftwood. The water was impossibly clear, moving with purpose. You knelt to drink, cupping it into your hands, letting it splash over your face. The shock of it was bracing. It pulled you fully into the moment. You sat for a long time on a flat rock, watching the current, following its glinting surface as far upstream as your eyes could go. Water, you realized, was the great archivist. It carried everything: soil, memory, ash, even time. The river you touched now had touched other hands, other stones, passed through storms and quiet fields, carried messages in its cold fingers. And now it passed you by, carrying part of you with it. Later, as the light began to slant low, you followed the river's course southward, walking along its edge where the grass was thinner and the footing sound. The river would eventually lead you to the next range, where the hills darkened into bluish silhouettes. The journey ahead was still long, but the urgency that once gnawed at the mind had softened. Now, time was a companion, not a countdown. When evening came, you made camp near a stand of willows, their long arms bent in the breeze like dancers at rest. The fire you built was modest, its light flickering against the silver bark around you. You cooked simply, you ate slowly, you let the night rise without interruption. Above, the sky unfolded with stars, one by one, then all at once. You lay on your back with your hat over your eyes, not to sleep, but to filter the view just enough to notice each star's emergence. The body softened against the earth, muscles loosened, thought dispersed. The journey had given you no answers, but it had given you the patience to stop asking questions that didn't need answering. The world, in its quiet turns and unspoken languages, had begun to feel more legible not in words, but in gestures, in temperatures, in cycles. And as your breath slowed into sleep, you understood something that didn't require articulation. That even now, even far from arrival, you were already home. As dawn broke over the willow-covered camp, the wind carried with it a new kind of silence, one that didn't come from the absence of sound, but from a quieting within. There was no rustle of urgency, no internal summons toward a finish line. The walk, once measured in miles, was now counted in breaths and blinks and subtle shifts in light. The day had not yet taken shape, but already it held a gravity, a stillness that felt like the closing of a chapter not yet fully written. The fire had burned low during the night, its ash scattered and soft, an echo of warmth absorbed by the earth. The coals smoldered faintly, still clinging to their redness, like a memory refusing to be extinguished. You covered them gently with soil, not out of duty, but out of gratitude. Even extinguishing had become a kind of ceremony. The trail no longer unfolded in the way it had before. The boundaries that once demarcated path and wilderness, direction and detour, had blurred. The land now offered no signs, no cairns, no worn grooves to assure you of others passing. Yet, there was no fear in the unmarked way forward. The landscape had become legible not in symbols, but in sensation. Where the wind leaned, where the slope dipped, where the light lingered longer on one side of a stone, these were now your compass. Ahead lay a narrow plateau, brittle with sun-bleached grass and spotted with stones that jutted from the earth like the worn bones of the land itself. Each one seemed ancient, as if it had not only outlasted centuries of weather, but had been placed deliberately, like punctuation in a sentence written in the grammar of silence. You moved among them slowly, not to navigate, but to commune. Their roughness met the solace of your boots without resistance. This was no longer terrain to conquer, but a realm to witness. The heat began to press down early, not with the sharpness of midsummer, but with a heavy constancy that made each movement deliberate. The body had become leaner now, more efficient. Hunger arrived not on a schedule, but as a whisper, and it was answered simply with a piece of dry bread, a sip of cool water, a handful of berries. Eating, like everything else, had shed its excess. There was no indulgence here, only necessity, made sacred by the absence of waste. Far below the plateau, a basin stretched out like a faded parchment, crisscrossed with the shadows of clouds drifting above. Nothing moved in the distance. No herds, no travelers, no flicker of smoke or movement betrayed the presence of others. Yet, it did not feel empty. The emptiness had a presence all its own, as if the land itself was watching, waiting, recording. You descended slowly, Each step loosened tiny stones. Each stone tumbled down into silence. The slope required attention. It wasn't steep enough to threaten danger, but it asked for humility. Downward travel always did. There was something about moving toward the earth that made one smaller, more aware of gravity, more conscious of one's weight, not just of body, but of intention. At the bottom of the basin, the air changed. The wind disappeared, blocked by the curvature of the land, and the warmth settled into the hollows. Here, the world held its breath. Insects buzzed lazily in the reeds that grew near a dried-up stream, their wings catching the light in brief, silvery flashes. The path, if it could still be called that, led along this stream's ghost, winding like a scar through the valley. You walked beside it, matching your rhythm to its long-forgotten flow. Sometimes the earth beneath your feet crumbled slightly, as if remembering what it was like to carry water. Small plants clung to the edges, some green, others brittle with thirst. Everything here felt suspended alive, but paused. Midday came and passed without notice. The sun, high and unapologetic, cast shadows directly beneath you. There was no shelter, but what the mind provided: a narrowing of awareness, a focusing inward, a return to the breath. This was not suffering. This was a recalibration. In the absence of distraction, the self emerged not as identity, but as process. You were no longer you in the way you had once been. You were a series of responses to heat, to hunger, to direction, to light. You were the sum of your continuance. Beyond the basin, the land rose again, this time not in steep inclines, but in long, slow waves. The soil darkened, the plants became thicker, more aromatic. Sage, lavender, juniper all appeared not in cultivated rows, but in scattered constellations. Their scents drifted up, mingling in a perfume of earth and resolve. You crushed some underfoot, and the oils released with a suddenness that felt like memory, sharp, invisible, intimate. You climbed, not with effort, but with inevitability. The body no longer resisted ascent, it simply adapted. The sky darkened slightly, not with storm, but with the layering of clouds that moved like ponderous thoughts across the horizon. The wine returned, cooler now, brushing against your face like a reminder of altitude. Birds wheeled high above, distant and aloof, their calls brief and without melody. At a crest, you paused. The land behind you stretched for miles, a sequence of textures and temperatures, none of which could be mapped in lines. The basin was now a hollowed shape in the earth. The plateau, a memory, you could see it all, yet it no longer held you. The trail's lessons, etched into your legs and lungs, had not been learned in looking back. Ahead, the ridgeline curved eastward, leading toward a darker band of forest. But before you continued, you found a smooth, flat rock and soot. The weight of the pack settled beside you, the pressure lifted from your spine. You folded your hands over your knees, not in prayer but in rest. The view offered nothing spectacular, no jagged peaks or vast bodies of water, just the quiet undulation of land meeting sky, interrupted by the occasional tree or ridge. Yet, it felt complete. There was no longing here, no sense of needing more, of needing elsewhere. The moment stood wholly on its own. The past was a haze behind you, the future a silence ahead. The present, unadorned and uncomplicated, was enough. The wind rose slightly. A hawk passed overhead, circling in a wide, slow loop before vanishing beyond the ridge. You rose, slowly, not out of reluctance, but from the simple truth that the body had rested enough. The trail did not demand urgency. It only asked that you continue, and so you did. The forest ahead thickened quickly, its canopy filtering the light into narrow shafts that cut the air like cathedral beams. The temperature dropped, and with it came the smell of loam and leaf, of the deep, undisturbed world beneath bark. Moss covered the bases of trees in thick, soft layers. The sound of your steps was muffled now, more felt than heard. Here, time changed. Hours no longer marked themselves in sun positions, but in the feel of temperature on your skin, You lost track of how long you walked. The trail turned from dirt to mulch, to pine needle carpet, to mud where underground springs seeped silently. Eventually, you came upon a clearing, small and circular, with a single stone in its center. Not a marker, not a grave. Just a stone, as though the earth had pushed it there for no reason other than balance. You sat once more, watching how the light filtered down, how dust hung suspended in those golden shafts. You breathed. In, out. It was enough. When the sun finally touched the treetops and the air turned to silver, you made camp. There was no fire this time. Only the quiet comfort of wool and moss, and the knowledge that sleep would come not because you called it, but because you were ready. And as you lay back beneath the darkening canopy, the forest breathing around you, you understood. This path had never been about arrival. It had always been about return. Not to a place, but to a way of being. To the quiet within, to the unasked question. To the step taken not to reach, but to remember, and that was enough. The morning arrived in gradients, not in the brilliance of sudden light, but in the gradual recession of shadow. There was no sunrise to be seen, only a shifting in the tone of the sky above the forest canopy, as though the trees had negotiated with the sun to reveal themselves in stages. In this dimness, there was a gentleness to waking, not a jolt from dreams, but an unspooling of sleep into breath, into presence, into the simple realization of continued existence. The ground beneath had softened during the night, dew and fallen, leaves fusing into a kind of padded bed, forgiving of weight and warm enough to allow stillness. There was no need to rush the first movement. The body, tuned now to a different rhythm, no longer operated on command but on invitation. Muscles responded like old friends, not eager, not reluctant, simply present, rising. You packed slowly, each gesture imbued with a sense of quiet finality. The forest held its own logic. Time here was not linear. It folded into itself like fog, drifting through the trunks and settling in layers. You sensed the day would be long, though not in hardship. It would unfold like the tale of a song you once heard in childhood, vaguely familiar, but impossible to predict. Moving through the trees, the trail ceased to matter. It wasn't lost, it had simply ceased to be necessary. The forest itself was enough. Where the light was thickest, you walked. Where it grew dense and tangled, you waited, or bent, or circled, always listening, not with the ears, but with a deeper intuition, honed over the weeks of solitary travel. No creature appeared, no thread emerged. The forest was not silent, but it was sovereign, and in that sovereignty, you felt neither watched nor welcomed, only permitted. Hours passed, perhaps many, perhaps few. They no longer marked themselves in numbers. Instead, you knew the day by the shapes of shadow, by the shift in air as afternoon gathered behind the trees. The world began to rise again, gentle slopes leading away from the thicket, drawing you upward into clearer air. With each step, the forest thinned, until finally it yielded to an open rise, a bald knob of earth crowned by wind and silence. From this height, the world returned, not the one left behind weeks before, but something broader, less detailed. Below lay a valley so wide it seemed more imagined than real, its far end lost in haze. The ridges along the edges of the world curled like the rim of a bowl, immense and steady. Clouds hung low and slow, their bellies glowing with afternoon gold. Here, the air was sparse, clean, untouched by smoke or speech. You stood for some time, not because the view demanded it, but because the body required stillness to absorb so vast a breadth of space. There were no signs of civilization, no roads, no fences, no distant farms, only the contour of land laid bare by time, unbroken by ambition. Descending, the wind changed. It carried with it a faint metallic tang, the scent of stone long exposed. This side of the hill bore no trees, only hardy shrubs and occasional tufts of dry grass. The soil was thinner here, lighter in color, and scattered with small bones, rabbits perhaps, or birds, not fresh, not morbid, just part of the landscape's accounting. Far ahead, barely visible at first, was a long, Narrow, ridge, a sort of natural bridge leading across a chasm that split the earth with no visible bottom. As you neared, the air grew cooler, the wind sharper, funneled by the gap. The crossing was treacherous not because of its width, but because of its subtlety. The path was just wide enough for a single person, and each side dropped steeply into mist. There was no sound rising from below, no echo, no wind. It might have been endless. You stepped carefully, not out of fear, but with reverence. This was not a place to stumble. It demanded focus, not as a threat, but as a request for presence. Midway across, you paused not to look down, but to feel. The body responded with a deep stillness. Heart slowed, breath shallow, every sense attuned to balance. Crossing became less about movement and more about suspension, a meditation of equilibrium. On the far side, the land changed again. The world flattened into a high desert plain, with scrub brush and sandstone and the kind of wide, open space that dissolved all sense of scale. You could walk for hours and feel as if you'd gone nowhere, or take 10 steps and see the entire sky shift. The sun began to dip behind distant hills, elongating shadows until they lost their anchor. You found a place to stop, not because of necessity, but because the air told you to. The plateau welcomed pause. There was no shelter, only a large, flat stone slightly raised from the earth. You placed your pack beside it, unrolled the mat, and sat cross-legged facing the last light. The warmth from the stone seeped into your legs. The wind passed like a song too old to sing, humming only in remnants through the folds of your sleeves. There was no fire tonight. The wood was scarce, and the air still held enough of the day's heat to make one unnecessary. Food was simple, dried roots, water, a few berries, each bite taken with both gratitude and detachment. Hunger had become ceremonial, something addressed, not indulged as the light faded. The sky revealed itself in quiet blue, then in deeper shades of dusk. The first star blinked into existence, not announced, not celebrated, just present, and then others followed, not in clusters, but in gentle scatterings, like memories returning after a long absence. No constellation asserted itself. No pattern demanded recognition. The sky was not a map. It was a mirror. Lying back, you let the stone cradle your spine. The stars above did not flicker. They held steady, indifferent to the breath of the watcher. Below, the mind, softened by the day's movement, no longer reached for interpretation. It rested in sensation, in the cooling of the earth, in the stretch of tired muscles, in the absence of worrying. Sleep came slowly, not because the body resisted, but because there was no urgency. Rest now flowed like a stream, unblocked by the debris of thought. It took you gently, and in that night, without dreams, something loosened, a tether, imperceptible until released, fell away. Not with a snap, but with a sigh. There would be no return, not to the place once called home, not to the identity that bore your name. That person had dissolved, like footprints in shifting sand. The trail had not led you outward, but inward, and inward, you had found the great quiet. When morning came again, it did not announce itself. It arrived with the wind, cool, steady, and unceremonious. The world remained unchanged, and yet everything was different. The horizon still curved, the land still stretched, but you, no longer a traveler, had become a part of it. There was no longer a question of where to go next. The trail had not ended. It had disappeared, absorbed into the body, the breath, the gaze. You rose without hurry, gathered your things, with hands neither tired nor eager, and walked. Not to arrive, not to leave, only to continue. Only to remember what it meant to be. You continue along the vanished trail. Now a memory felt more than a place to walk. The vast plain stretches before you in expanse so wide it seems to swallow the horizon whole. Here, the air is thinner, and each breath feels like a quiet exchange with the earth itself. The grasses ripple beneath the faintest breeze, like waves folding softly over one another, whispering secrets older than time. It is as if the land breathes with a slow, measured pulse, inviting you to match its rhythm. The sky above bears a gentle haze, a delicate veil that softens the brightness of the sun, turning its light into a slow caress rather than a sharp glare. Shadows cast by tufts of prairie grass stretch long and languid, bending in the wind's unhurried direction. This place is less about movement and more about the stillness that resides within it, a sanctuary for moments unnoticed in hurried days. As you walk, the sensation of being observed gently presses at the edge of perception, not by eyes or by presence, but by the resonance of the land itself, as if the plains hold memories of every traveler who ever crossed its breadth. Each step you take stirs a faint echo, ghosts of horses' hooves, wheels turning, the low murmur of conversation, lost to time. Historians still debate how many souls traverse these plains, some claiming the numbers are too vast to measure, others insisting that only a few dared such a slow and deliberate journey. But in truth, the trail is less about the count and more about the character of passage, about moving through the world with reverence rather than haste. There are small surprises here, tucked away beneath the grass and stone. You notice clusters of wild flowers, their petals fragile and bright against the muted palette of the prairie. Among them, a single, striking blue blossom grows where no one would expect, an anomaly to the eye but perhaps a sign of resilience, a metaphor for travelers who thrive despite hardships. Few would know that such flowers were once thought to be talismans for safe passage, tokens passed from hand to hand before the journey began, believed to hold the blessing of the land. Your footsteps carry you onward, each one a gentle imprint on a landscape that changes imperceptibly with the shifting light. The earth beneath is cracked and dry in places, a reminder of seasons past, yet in others, it holds pools of rainwater from recent storms, mirrors reflecting the expanse above. You stoop briefly to touch the water, cool and still, an oasis in the slow march of time. As you move deeper into the plains, the wind shifts and carries with it a different scent, one of distant pine and damp earth. The land begins to undulate with soft hills, breaking the flatness and offering new contours to explore. These gentle rises become vantage points, places to pause and consider the vastness behind and ahead. The horizon, ever elusive, stretches, unbroken except where the silhouettes of distant mountains rise like faded ghosts. You find one such knoll and settle upon it, feeling the sun's warmth seep into your skin. From here, the world spreads out like a faded tapestry, woven from the threads of history and nature intertwined. There is a quiet majesty in the way the plain meets the sky, in endless meeting, without boundary, without claim. The plains hold more than just physical space. They are a repository of stories untold, of journeys marked not in miles, but in moments, of stillness and reflection. Some historians argue about the origins of certain trails crisscrossing these lands, debating whether they were forged by indigenous peoples, early settlers, or nature itself carving a path through the seasons. These questions remain open, like the plains themselves, vast, mysterious, and ever unfolding. You rise, carrying with you the quiet hum of the land, and begin again. Your steps feel lighter, as if the plains have lent you a part of their patience, a fragment of their eternal calm. You move forward not with urgency, but with a gentle certainty, knowing the journey is less about destination and more about becoming attuned to the slow unfolding of each breath, each footfall, each moment slipping softly into the next. Time here is a soft current, carrying you gently forward, and you follow without resistance, your heart sensing to the quiet cadence of the whispering plains. As the sun begins its slow descent, the sky softens into hues of amber and rose, casting a warm glow over the endless sweep of prairie you now traverse. The air grows cooler and the shadows stretch longer, reaching across the land like lazy fingers bidding the day farewell. You feel the subtle shift in atmosphere, the change from the sun's direct embrace to the gentle caress of evening, a transition that invites slowing, breathing, simply being. The campfires of earlier travelers come alive in your mind's eye. As you walk, flickering orange flames dance against the twilight, their glow reflecting in the eyes of weary oxen and casting long, wavering shadows on wagon wheels and canvas covers. These fires were more than sources of warmth or light, they were hearths of community and calm, where stories wove into the night like smoke curling upward, carrying hopes and fears skyward. You imagine the scene, the quiet murmurs of voices, blending with the crackle of flames, the soft thud of wood settling, the occasional creak of a weary wagon. The air is tinged with the scent of burnt wood and damp earth, a sensory memory that anchors the mind to this moment in time. Fires offered a sanctuary from the vastness surrounding the travelers, a small circle of comfort in an otherwise open world. Travelers on these trails often kept their fires modest, mindful of the need to conserve precious fuel and to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Some even carried embers in specially designed firepots, ensuring that the flame could be rekindled each night without the arduous task of starting anew. This practical approach reflects the measured, slow rhythm of life on the trail. Every task approached with thoughtful care rather than haste. Amidst the warm glow of the firelight, the night animals began their course, the plaintive howl of a coyote, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of small creatures scurrying through dry grass. These sounds, once perhaps unsettling to the unaccustomed, became a lullaby of the plains. The wilderness and the travelers formed a quiet alliance, one providing shelter, the other reverence. Few know that in some campsites, travelers would arrange stones around the fire in particular patterns, symbols passed down through generations or borrowed from native traditions. These stones sometimes carried meanings: protection, guidance, or remembrance, and their arrangement was believed to influence the traveler's fortune in the days to come. Whether grounded in superstition or genuine cultural practice, these details remind us how human presence shapes even the simplest acts into rituals, weaving threads of meaning through the fabric of daily life. The sky deepens to a rich indigo, and stars begin to flicker awake. The ancient constellations take their places overhead, guiding the eyes and hearts of wanderers. Without the distraction of modern light, the night sky spills its brilliance freely, a vault of countless pinpricks of silver. It's easy to feel as if you are the only person awake on the planet. Wrapped in this vast, dark embrace, you pause to look up, letting your gaze wander among the celestial patterns. The North Star holds steady, a silent sentinel in the northern sky, anchoring the restless traveler's spirit. Historically, this star served as a guiding light for many who journeyed westward, an unwavering point of reference amid uncertainty. Yet, some historians debate whether all travelers relied equally on the stars, given the occasional cloudy nights or the distractions of the trail itself. Regardless, the stars remain a timeless companion to the slow traveler, offering a quiet reassurance. As night deepens, the campfire's glow flickers lower, embers dying down to a bed of warm coals. The sounds of the night grow softer, blending into a soothing symphony of crickets and the distant sigh of the wind. The slow pace of travel is mirrored in this gradual dimming of light and sound, a natural decrescendo inviting rest and reflection. There is a profound intimacy in this nightly ritual, the moment when the day's exertions fade, and the body surrenders to stillness. It is here that the mind drifts, wandering through memories and dreams, carried gently on the evening's hush. The quiet intimacy of campfire nights is a reminder that even in the midst of a long journey, moments of peace and connection endure. You sense the gentle closeness of the community, not always spoken aloud but felt in the shared space of the firelight. In this liminal hour, individual burdens soften, and the journey's challenges transform into shared experiences, woven into the communal story carried forward with each passing night. This ritual of slowing down at day's end is not just practical, it is deeply human. In a world increasingly defined by speed and urgency, the slow traveler's night fire, a meditation on patience, resilience, and belonging. The flames speak a language older than words, inviting you to rest in the warmth of the moment, to listen to the whispered stories etched into the land, and to find comfort in the simple act of being present. The fire's last sparks fade, leaving behind only the memory of warmth. You close your eyes briefly, inhaling the cool night air laced with the scent of sagebrush and earth. The vastness of the night surrounds you, a silent promise of continuity and hope. As the stars wheel slowly overhead and the wind sighs gently across the plains, you feel the trail's slow rhythm settle deep within you. The night is not an end, but a soft pause, a quiet space between steps, a lull in the song of the journey. You awaken to a dawn so gentle it feels as though the world itself is breathing you awake. The first light creeps slowly across the horizon, soft and diffused like a whisper rather than a sudden blaze. The sky is a canvas of muted pastels, faint pinks bleeding into pale blues, delicate gold brushing the tips of the distant hills. Everything moves with a quietude that seems almost sacred, as if nature herself pauses to greet the new day without hurry or fanfare. The air holds a cool crispness, carrying the subtle scent of dew on grasses and the faintest trace of wood smoke, lingering from last night's fires. It brushes softly against your skin, a gentle reminder that the earth turns steadily, even when the pace of travel is slow and deliberate. You step out from the shelter of the wagon's canvas, feeling the uneven ground beneath your feet, the tiny shifts of earth that speak of a world both alive and patient. Dawn on the trail is not merely the start of a new day, it is a moment of renewal, a subtle resetting of the senses before the long hours ahead. The plains are cloaked in a delicate haze, the kind that softens edges and mutes colors, wrapping the landscape in a gentle embrace. It invites you to linger, to breathe deeply, and to savor the fragile calm before the day's journey resumes. As you walk along the narrow trail, the silence is punctuated by small sounds that might have been overlooked in the busyness of midday: the faint rustle of grass stirred by a waking breeze, the distant call of a meadow lark greeting the sun, the subtle crunch of your boots on the dry soil. These sounds blend into a quiet symphony that soothes the mind and quiets the restless heart. The slow pace of travel on a covered wagon trail means that dawn is not rushed or ignored. Instead, it becomes a cherished time, a natural pause that allows travelers to prepare both body and spirit for the road ahead. You can imagine how families and solitary wanderers alike would rise with the sun, taking moments to tend to their animals, pack up their belongings, and share silent reflections as the world wakes around them. Historians note that many early travelers developed rituals at dawn, simple acts repeated day after day that anchored them amidst the uncertainties of the journey. These might include washing faces with cold water from a nearby stream, stretching tired limbs under the growing light, or gathering around for a quiet moment before breaking camp. Such routines grounded the travelers, offering comfort in the small certainties of daily life. Even amid the vast unknown, the morning light reveals details previously hidden in shadow. You notice the dew sparkling on the tips of tall grasses, like tiny jewels scattered by the night's passage. The scent of wildflowers, faint but persistent, mingles with the fresh earthiness of the trail. You bend slightly to observe a cluster of delicate blooms, their colors muted yet full of quiet life. This simple beauty, easily missed in the rush of modern days, becomes a balm to the weary soul. Moving forward, the trail reveals subtle changes in terrain: the gradual ascent of a gentle rise, the curve of a small creek reflecting the pale sky, the spread of wild sage that perfumes the air. Each step feels like a meditation, a slow unfolding of the landscape that invites deep presence rather than fleeting glance. The pace of travel dictates the rhythm of the day, encouraging a form of mindfulness that is rare in faster modes of movement. There is time to observe, to notice, to reflect on the world and your place within it. This slow unfolding challenges modern assumptions about efficiency and productivity, inviting instead a profound appreciation for the journey itself. There is a certain magic in the way light changes the world at dawn. Shadows shrink and retreat, colors grow richer, and the landscape seems to awaken not just visually, but spiritually. Travelers on the trail understood this intuitively, finding in the dawn a sacred space where hope and uncertainty could coexist. In quiet harmony, you come across a shallow creek, its water clear and cold, flowing gently over smooth stones. It offers a moment of refreshment and reflection. You imagine how the pioneers would have paused here, dipping hands and faces into the cool stream, letting the water wash away fatigue and renew resolve. Such moments were vital reminders that the journey was not only about distance, but about endurance and renewal. The landscape around you is dotted with traces of those who passed before, faint wagon ruts pressed into the earth, scattered fragments of worn leather or withered wood half buried by time. These echoes of human presence feel like whispers from the past, subtle markers that connect you across centuries to the slow travelers who once moved with similar deliberation. There is a historical curiosity in the way these trails became arteries of migration and hope. The covered wagon was not merely a vehicle, but a symbol of new beginnings, of resilience in the face of unknown horizons. Yet, historians continue to debate the exact routes and the experiences of those who traveled them, some emphasizing hardship and loss, others highlighting community and perseverance. You walk with an awareness of these layered histories, feeling the weight and lightness of each step. The dawn is not simply a time of day, but a metaphor for the slow, patient unfolding of life itself. It invites you to embrace the uncertainty and beauty of the journey, to find comfort in the steady pace and the quiet moments that lie between. As the sun climbs higher, the air warms, and the light brightens, you sense the day's journey gathering momentum. Yet the spirit of the slow traveler remains a commitment to moving with intention and grace, honoring the landscape and the passage of time. The trail ahead stretches into the shimmering heat. But for now, you linger in the gentle dawn, carrying its calm forward like a precious ember. The slow pace teaches that every moment, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, holds the potential for discovery and peace. And so you continue, step by measured step, wrapped in the soft light of morning and the enduring whispers of the trail. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, the landscape around you softens into a palette of warm golds and gentle ambers. The air cools just enough to be a relief after the sun's midday warmth, inviting you to breathe more deeply and let your muscles relax from the steady rhythm of walking and wagon rolling. The evening on the trail, a time of transformation not only of the sky, but of the body and spirit as well. You notice the shadows lengthening across the earth, stretching and reaching as if reluctant to let go of the light. The trees, sparse but steadfast, stand silhouetted against the glowing sky, their branches whispering quietly in the mild breeze. The trail itself seems to glow with a soft luminescence, the dust stirred by the wagons catching the last rays and creating a gentle haze that hovers like a memory suspended in air. Settling in for the night is a ritual all its own, woven through with the same slow patience that marks the day's travel. Unlike the frenetic pace of modern life, the evening on the trail unfolds gradually as the sun dips lower and the world prepares to rest. There is no rush, only the steady cadence of packing away the day and preparing for the quiet hours ahead. You find yourself drawn to the simple acts of the evening, the careful stacking of firewood, the brushing off of dust and grit from worn clothes, the gentle tending of horses and oxen whose tired eyes mirror your own weariness. These moments are sacred, small acts of care that bind the travelers to the land and to one another. The campfire, when lit, becomes a gathering place and a symbol of warmth, both physical and emotional. Its flickering light casts playful shadows, illuminating faces tired but resolute. The smell of burning wood mixes with the scent of earth and sagebrush, creating an atmosphere of calm and safety. Around the fire, stories are often shared, though, in your quiet journey, you sense that even silence speaks volumes. There is a deep comfort in the predictability of this evening routine. The rituals, though simple, create a sense of continuity and belonging. Historians note that such routines were vital for the mental health of pioneers and travelers who faced the unknown each day. The evening fire was a beacon, a reminder that no matter how vast the wilderness, there was always a circle of light and warmth. As twilight deepens, the sky above shifts from gold to dusky rose, then to a deep indigo dotted with emerging stars. The first constellations begin to appear, steady and unchanging, a celestial guide that has watched over travelers for millennia. The slow travelers of covered wagons would have looked up to these same stars, finding in their constancy a quiet reassurance. There is a curious paradox in the way the trail both isolates and connects. On one hand, the wide open spaces and endless horizon can feel lonely, a vast expanse where the next human presence is miles away. Yet, on the other hand, there is a profound sense of connection both to those who have traveled before and to those who share this moment now, united by the same sky and the same slow journey. One lesser-known fact about these trails is how the night's chill was often the harshest adversary. Travelers would pile on layers of blankets and wear thick garments to fend off the cold that seeped into bones. The quiet flicker of the fire became not just comfort but a necessary defense against the creeping cold, and the shadows beyond the campfires glow. As darkness envelops the landscape, the sounds of the night rise, a chorus of crickets, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a coyote. These natural sounds form a lullaby that blends with the crackling fire, soothing the mind and easing the body toward rest. The slow traveler learns to listen, to be present in these moments of calm and stillness. The camp is a small island of life amid the vast wilderness. The wagons stand clustered like sentinels, their canvas coverings muted in the night's embrace. The animals settle nearby, their breathing slow and steady, a rhythmic heartbeat that echoes the pulse of the earth. You feel the steady hum of this shared existence, a quiet harmony that sustains you through the night. Historians still debate the exact dynamics of these camp gatherings. Some describe them as tight-knit communities born of necessity, while others emphasize the solitude and introspection that the trail demanded. Yet all agree on one thing: the evening was a sacred time for restoration and reflection, a slow exhale after the exertions of the day. The slow pace of the covered wagon journey invites you to inhabit these evenings fully, to embrace the quiet and the shadows, to find peace in the rhythmic patterns of tending, resting, and watching the stars wheel overhead. It is a time when the external world quiets and the internal landscape opens, allowing for a gentle reckoning with the day's trials and hopes for the next stop. As you prepare to settle yourself near the fire's fading glow, you feel the profound stillness of the moment, an invitation to slow down not only in body but in spirit. The trail, in its unhurried way, teaches patience and presence, inviting you to find comfort in the steady, unchanging rhythm of the earth and sky. This evening, as every evening on the trail, holds the promise of rest and renewal. The slow journey, with all its hardships and beauties, unfolds in these quiet moments that remind you that the journey itself, more than the destination, shapes who you are. You breathe deeply, the cool night air filling your lungs, and feel a gentle peace settle over you. The slow dance of shadows and light continues, a timeless rhythm that carries you softly into the night. Before the first pale fingers of dawn touch the horizon, the world holds its breath in a suspended moment of stillness. The night, with all its sounds and shadows, begins to retreat gently, giving way to a slow unfurling of light that spills softly over the sleeping land. You, too, feel this quiet promise in the air, a subtle stirring that invites the body and mind to awaken gradually, in harmony with the rhythm of the trail. The pre-dawn chill lingers, delicate and crisp, as if the earth itself is exhaling after the long night. Around you, the camp remains cocooned in silence, save for the occasional rustle of an animal stirring or the faint creak of a wagon settling under the weight of its own journey. These sounds, so faint and tender, seem amplified in the hush, drawing attention to the intricate pulse of life that persists even in the stillness. Travelers on these old wagon trails often spoke of this sacred time, the fragile pause before the world wakes fully. The dawn was less a sudden event and more a gradual unveiling, a gentle rise from darkness that asked for patience and reverence. Historians note that the way pioneers paced themselves to the day's light was not simply a matter of necessity, but an intimate dance with the natural world. As you stand quietly, watching the horizon glow faintly in shades of lavender and rose, You notice how the land transforms. Shadows shrink and soften, hills and trees take on clearer shapes, and the familiar trail becomes a path inviting the next steps. The air, still cool, carries the faint scent of dew on grasses and the distant promise of warming sun. There is a paradox in this slow awakening. While the promise of the new day brings hope and energy, it also marks a return to the hardships and uncertainties that travel on the trail entails. You feel the weight of both anticipation and weariness, a reminder that the journey's pace, slow, deliberate, and unyielding, never truly stops. You begin to notice small details that escape notice during the heat and bustle of midday. A single, wild flower opens delicately to the dawn, its petals kissed by light. A bird flits briefly from branch to branch, its song just beginning to rise in the still morning air. These subtle signs of life seem to punctuate the slow rhythm of the trail with moments of quiet wonder. The camp slowly stirs to life as other travelers emerge from their resting places, each movement measured and respectful of the morning calm. The wagons, draped in canvas, stand like silent sentinels awaiting the day's demands. The oxen and horses, too, seem to sense the turning of time, shifting their weight or flicking their tails in soft acknowledgement. Morning preparations take on a rhythm all their own, kindling fires, brewing coffee over small flames, and preparing meager breakfasts of hardtack and whatever else can be salvaged or carried. Each act, simple and repetitive, is performed with care and mindfulness, as if the slow pace of the trail insists on attention to even the smallest detail. One curious fact about these dawns on the trail, how the early light revealed more than just the landscape. It exposed the scars and marks left by the passage of time. Trails worn deep by countless wagon wheels, flattened grasses where animals had rested, and even the faint footprints of those who walked alongside the wagons. These signs, often overlooked, were a reminder of the many who had journeyed before and the shared experience etched into the earth itself. You notice how the changing light brings out different hues and textures in the landscape: soft greens of sagebrush, dusty browns of well-trodden paths, and the subtle shimmer of early morning dew. The natural world, caught between night and day, seems to pulse with a quiet energy, a gentle breath held just long enough to invite your own awareness. There is a slow unfolding in this moment, a gradual emergence that mirrors the way the journey itself moves, not in leaps or bounds, but in steady, consistent steps. The pioneers knew this well. Their diaries, when preserved, often speak not of grand events, but of these everyday rhythms: the dawn's promise, the slow packing of camp, the measured pace of the wagons. As the sun climbs higher, the air warms and the world awakens fully. The birds' songs grow bolder, carrying through the stillness like a celebration of light and life. The wagons begin to roll once more, creaking and groaning under their loads, while the animals pick up their steady pace, hooves kicking up soft dust that drifts lazily in the morning air. This slow continuation of the trail invites you to reflect on the nature of time itself, the way it stretches and compresses, flows and lingers. The covered wagon journey, a meditation on patience, endurance, and the quiet beauty found in movement that respects the land and the seasons. It is a reminder that progress is not always about speed but about persistence and presence. One historical note still debated among scholars concerns how the pioneers chose their daily stopping points. Some argue it was strictly practical availability of water, grazing, and shelter, while others suggest a deeper intuition guided these choices, a connection to the landscape that modern travelers might miss. Whatever the truth, these choices shape the rhythm and safety of each day's journey. The dawn, with all its subtle transformations, is a gift that asks you to slow down, to notice what might otherwise go unseen. It teaches that even in the harshest environments, moments of quiet grace exist waiting to be recognized and cherished. As you prepare to move forward once again, the trail ahead seems less daunting, framed by the gentle light of morning and the steady promise of a slow journey lived fully. The slow pace is no longer merely a necessity, but a way of being, an invitation to move with intention and to find peace in the unfolding landscape. This slow unfolding continues as the day stretches. Ahead each step, each turn of the wagon wheel, a part of a larger journey woven through time and space. The dawn's quiet promise lingers with you, a steady companion as you face the miles yet to come. The slow rhythm of the trail, marked by these early morning moments, reminds you that every journey, no matter how difficult or long, is composed of countless small beginnings, each one a chance to breathe, to observe, and to move forward with gentle determination. As the sun sinks low toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of burnt orange and soft violet, you find yourself moving ever slower, matching the day's last light with a gentle unwinding. The heat of midday, long faded, leaves behind a soft warmth that settles into the earth and lingers in the air like a fading melody. Your pace, once steady and purposeful, now takes on a measured, almost reverential quality, each step along the trail carrying the weight of the day's journey and the quiet promise of rest. The covered wagon's wheels roll with a soothing, rhythmic creak, a sound familiar and constant, echoing the heartbeat of the trail itself. It's a song of endurance, whispered through the dust and timber, one that has accompanied countless travelers who, like you, have sought passage through these ancient lands. This sound, steady and unchanging, grounds you even as the landscape shifts in the deepening twilight around you. The world softens as shadows lengthen and stretch across the ground. Trees, once bright and full, now stand as darkened silhouettes, their branches tracing delicate patterns against the fading sky. The air grows cooler, carrying the scent of pine and earth mixed with the faint, lingering aroma of campfires yet to be rekindled. This scent wraps around you like a comforting shawl, a subtle reminder of shared human presence in the vast wilderness. You notice how the colors of the land change under this gentle evening light. What seemed harsh and unyielding in the heat of day now reveals subtle textures and layers, the soft folds of distant hills, the delicate veins in withered leaves, the gentle curve of a well-worn trail curling into the horizon. This shift in perspective invites a slow, quiet contemplation and invitation to witness the beauty hidden within the rugged journey. As the wagon crests a small rise, the valley below unfolds like a painting, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. The scene is peaceful yet alive with the subtle motions of nature winding down. Birds return to their nests, their flitting silhouettes disappearing into shadowed branches. Small animals scurry back to their dens, their quick movements barely perceptible in the fading light. You feel as if you have stepped into a timeless moment, suspended between day and night, motion and stillness. The pioneers who traveled these trails long ago must have treasured these evening hours as much as the dawn. Their journals, when preserved, speak of the calm that settled over camps as the day ended, an unspoken ritual of rest and reflection. Historians still debate the extent to which this quiet descent into night shaped the mental endurance of those who braved the trail. But one thing is certain: it was a time for the mind to catch up with the body, for stories to be told and silences to be shared. You, too, find your thoughts drifting in the mellow light. The long hours of travel, the bumps and jolts of the wagon, the occasional strain of muscle and bone all begin to blend into a background hum. It is a rhythm that invites you to slow your breathing, to sink deeper into the moment, and to find peace in the very act of moving forward, no matter how slowly. The campfire, once a distant glow, now flickers close at hand. Its warm light dances across faces withered by sun and wind, illuminating eyes that hold stories of hardship, hope, and resilience. Though conversation is sparse and voices hushed, the shared presence forms a quiet bond stronger than words, a community held together by the journey and the land. Evening on the trail was not without its challenges. Of course, the drop in temperature could be sudden and sharp, forcing weary travelers to bundle up against the chill. The threat of predators lurking in the shadows was a constant worrying, even if rarely realized. And the uncertainty of what tomorrow might bring, the condition of the trail, the weather, the health of animals hovered just beneath the surface of calm. Yet in this delicate balance between vulnerability and safety, Between exhaustion and renewal, you find a strange kind of grace. The slow descent of evening offers a space to gather strength, to breathe deeply, and to prepare for the miles yet to come. It is a reminder that every end contains within it the seed of a new beginning, wrapped in quiet promise. One fascinating detail often overlooked is how the pioneers used the evening hours to care for their animals and equipment, the watering of oxen and horses, the mending of canvas covers, the careful stacking of supplies. Each act was performed with a deliberate slowness born of necessity and respect. This nightly tending was more than routine. It was a ritual of survival and hope, a way to honor the companions who bore the burden of the journey alongside them. The fading light also revealed the subtle traces left by others who had passed before, footprints, discarded items, or faint markings on trees that served as silent guides. These small signs, easily missed in the rush of day, emerged as quiet testaments to the trail's long history and the countless stories woven into its dust. As you prepare to settle in for the night, the camp takes on a peaceful hush. The crackling fire becomes a steady heartbeat, its warmth the balm against the cool air. The stars begin to appear, timid at first, and then with growing confidence, sprinkling the sky with points of light that feel both distant and intimately close. You lie back and look upward, feeling the vastness of the universe stretch above you. The stars are ancient watchers, unchanged by the passing centuries, witnessing the same slow journeys, the same quiet struggles and triumphs. Their presence invites you to reflect on your place within this long continuum, a single step in a path traveled by many before. The night brings with it a special kind of silence, one that is not empty, but full of subtle sounds and sensations. The rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze, the distant call of a night bird, the soft breathing of animals resting nearby. These details weave together into a lullaby of the wilderness, a natural chorus that cradles you in a sense of calm. Historians continue to debate the impact of such quiet nights on the psychological endurance of pioneers. Some suggest that these moments of solitude and reflection were crucial for mental survival, offering a space to process the day's hardships and to find hope for what lay ahead. Others argue that the harsh realities often intruded, making rest uneasy. Regardless, there is no denying the profound role the night played in the slow rhythm of trail life. In this stillness, your thoughts drift to the many travelers whose lives have been shaped by this journey. You sense their hopes, their fears, and their determination woven into the fabric of the trail. The slow pace of travel, the endless horizon, the ever-changing sky all become symbols of endurance and quiet courage. As sleep begins to pull you down, the edges of the world soften and blur. The fire's glow dims to embers, the night sounds grow more distant, and your breathing slows in time with the gentle pulse of the earth. The journey has paused for now, resting in the cradle of night. In these final moments, the trail seems less a path to be conquered and more a companion to be embraced. The slow pace, once a source of frustration or weariness, becomes a lesson in patience and presence. It is a reminder that sometimes moving forward means moving gently, with kindness toward oneself and the land beneath. As your eyes close, the quiet descent of evening fades into a tender darkness, wrapped in the promise of a new dawn yet to come. The whispers of the trail linger, soft and steady, guiding you toward rest and renewal. End of script. Sweet dreams.